screen, so that is really good. Fab, so great to meet you all. So John asked me to come along. So I've worked in the NHS for, I think it's 23 years now. I'm an improvement person by background. I'm not a statistician. So I've done lots of different jobs in the NHS. I've got a strong interest in data, and I've worked for an organisation for the past, it's probably 3.5 years now, called NHS England and Improvement. So we're the national body in England. We've got an unusual role in the sense that we are a regulator. So we have regulatory powers, as does the CQC, Care Quality Commission, but we are also there to support organisations to improve. So I've got a really small team. I've got a picture of the team in my slide, and we've been doing a huge amount with boards over the past few years, and we have successfully got a huge number of organisations to adopt statistical process control over RAG reporting. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about. I think John's been a bit struck by how successful we've been. So that's what he wanted to cover. Is that fair, John?
That suits me very well. Any immediate questions, folks, before we take that out? Take it away, Sam.
Well, we got a little bit of background noise from a couple of people, so I don't know if people might want to be mute. They haven't done so far. The building work going on.
Stopping! Oh, you're on the bloody thing.
I can't hear a damn thing. I've got the volume maxed.
I think
Speakers aren't working.
John, can you mute people?
It's a mess, isn't it? Can you eat that other pie tonight?
Yeah, certainly. It's in the freezer there, isn't it?
Start until we've muted.
We can't work in the next 5 minutes. I'll have to just drop off. This is useless.
That sounds like a couple of people have joined and they can't hear. Okay, that's worked, John. I'm unmuted. I think I'm unmuted. Do you want to nod if I am? Yeah? Fabulous. Okay. And hopefully you can see my screen, John? Yes. Okay. Fabulous. So I'm just going to open up the chat box and then I'm going to go on to slideshow. Okay, so slideshow. From spuddling to stronger decision making. Most of you probably don't know what spuddling is yet, but you're going to know very soon. You might never forget the word. So let's move on. So I said that I'm part of a small team. So here's the team as we were a couple of years ago. This was the first birthday party for Making Data Count, which is basically our interactive PDF that tells people about SPC. So we've got Karen there in a dotty dress. Notice what she's wearing, that's important. Then we've got Jen, then that's me with the birthday hat on. And that is a birthday cake in the image of Making Data Count. So we are a little bit alternative. We were recently joined by Adam. And so we're supporting the whole of the NHS in England to make this change from RAG reporting to SPC. So what's our mission? So in the NHS, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the NHS. What do we see constantly? These are the kinds of things that we see every day, which is very unfortunate. So people have been wedded to their RAG reporting. Got some horrible visualizations here. This one's particularly awful, isn't it? So here we've got terrible colours and we've got arrows. So our mission is to get rid of all of this terrible stuff. What else do we want to get rid of? We want to get rid of comments that look like this. So we see lots and lots and lots of comments that talk about small increases or decreases in data. And that's the basis on which people are making decisions. So away with all of those things. So what is Making Data Count? So it is a whole programme of work. So the focus is data for better decision making. So we've got teaching materials that have been extremely popular. So we've got 2 interactive PDFs that are very accessible. They're written in very plain English. Then we have tools to enable people to create their very own charts. So I'll show you a bit more about that later. And probably the bulk of the time that we spend is in teaching. So we used to be allowed out, of course, to do lots of teaching. So there, I dress quite alternatively for some of these sessions. So you might notice in that little picture that I was dressed as a RAG report, so with my red, amber, green. So that makes people, that just reinforces the fact that we don't want them to be doing that. And Karen is wearing dots because of course we want people to plot the dots. So those interactive PDFs are primarily used in England. They've been very popular in the NHS, but we have got some nice global reach, which is a bit exciting. And should anybody want a copy of our interactive guide in Swedish, there is one available. So that is a bit random, but it is absolutely true. So what have we achieved? Achievements over the past, I'd say 3 years. Well, we've done board sessions with 120 boards across England. Now, to put that in perspective, I think John put in his detail about this session, there's 217 trusts. So we've worked with over half of the boards in England. As a result of a 90-minute training session, every single board has agreed that they're going to ditch the RAG reporting and they're going to adopt SPC in the way in which we teach it. And I'll come on to that in a moment. And virtually all of those organisations have now changed their reporting. So we started with trusts, but we're now moving on to CCGs, integrated care systems. And there's an increasingly growing social movement. So there's a real energy behind this now. And we've trained thousands of people in the approach. We do all of our training now virtually via Teams. If any of you want to join any training, I've got some details at the end. Since we started delivering virtual training, we've delivered training to 3,000 people. And that started in around September. And from those board sessions, we've literally got hundreds of testimonials which look like this. So you can read them for yourself. Basically, people really like the training sessions. Lots of people say, we were dreading that session because it was on data. We don't like data. It's really, really scary. And actually, it was really, really fantastic. So it's been a light bulb moment for lots of people. So I think there are 3 success factors. John said, you know, talk to people about why what you do is different because people will know about SPC. So why has this worked? And just to say, we have tried to do this before. Some of you might have come across somebody called Mike Davidge, who is a fantastic supporter of SPC. Mike got me into SPC a long time ago now. So it was Mike that got me into this game. So Mike would say, yes, we've tried to do this all before, and the difficult thing has actually been getting people to change. So how have we managed that? So the sessions that we run, the delivery style is fun and interactive. So I've got a little flavour for you of what we do with boards. We keep stuff really, really simple. We focus just on XMR charts. We've got a colour convention, which is helping people understand the charts. And we've introduced the use of some summary icons that I'm going to talk to you about. And all of the training sessions that we do are tailored to the organisation that we're working with. So we always use local examples in our board training sessions. So it's very applied. It's not a kind of academic teaching session. So I'm not going to run through a board session because we haven't got time, but I just wanted to introduce you to a little bit of the delivery style. So we do run interactive sessions, as I've said, and we run a little data scenario that I'm going to run with you now. So I'm hoping that you're used to using the chat box because that's what I want you to use. So I'm going to simulate a data set. So it is a real data set, and we're going to pretend that this data is in a healthcare setting, and we're going to pretend that the data relates to the number of serious incidents that are occurring in a hospital trust. Now, I'm the Programme Director for Serious Incident Reduction, and you're going to have the opportunity to give me some feedback on how well I'm doing my job. So I'm going to give you the opportunity as we go through this to tell me that I'm doing a good job. If you think I'm doing a good job, you can type good into the chat box. If I'm doing a bad job, type bad. And if you're not sure yet, you can type in a question mark. So remember, we do this with boards. I can imagine you're all going to probably have a similar reaction to the data. So the first month we had 8, then 11, 11, 19, a 14 and a 15. So we've got 6 months of data. We're going to add a median line to create a run chart. What might a linear trend line look like through the data? Well, of course, we can all imagine, but we're going to just add one on. So here's your first opportunity. Can you type into the chat box whether I'm doing a good job, a bad job, or whether you're not sure. This is the only data that we've got. So good, bad, or question mark. Okay, so this is absolutely what I'd expect from this audience. I'm getting lots and lots of question marks, so that's fantastic. That's not necessarily what I get with the board who don't know about SPC. So fabulous. Let's move on and let's see what happens next. So then we've got a 9, a 14, a 12 and a 5. So hey guys, that's the lowest number of incidents that we've seen. So I ask you the same question again. Am I doing a good job, a bad job, or are you not sure yet? And I've got a little follow-on question. So we don't have bonuses in the NHS. We might have this year, who knows? But if you could award me a bonus, come on, who wants to award me a bonus? Look, I've done an amazing job. I have reduced those incidents to 5. So I think that's very impressive. So I think a bonus is due. Okay, too soon to say, too few data points. Well, here's the problem with an educated audience. Generally, people aren't happy to give me a bonus, but you know, one has to try. So let's carry on. Let's see what happens next. So what happened next? We've got a 9, a 10, a 14 and a 15. So right to not award me the bonus. Now trebled the number of incidents. So not good at all. Now I'm going to add 1 more data point. Then I'm going to add in the additional lines to create an SPC chart. So here's your last opportunity to give me some feedback. Am I doing a good job, a bad job? Are you still not sure? Follow on question. Do any of you want to have a performance management conversation with me, or might you want to move me on? So if anybody wants to give me the sack, you can type boot into the chat box. And this is the point at which I decide whether I'm going to go and visit the organisation when I'm actually allowed out. And yes, this is interesting to see people's reactions at this point. So interesting job that you think I'm doing a good job. Yes, it clearly is in control. But absolutely, a couple of the rest of you are saying there's absolutely no improvement. So I'm not expecting to be sacked at this point, but if anybody did want to call me in to have a conversation, I think that is absolutely fair. But hey, somebody's going to keep me on. John thought I was doing an okay job there. So you're keeping me on, that's great, because I've got a brilliant improvement idea. I'm going to introduce it right now. I'm expecting an immediate impact. So I want you to type yes in the chat box when you are confident this idea has been successful. We're going to roll it out to the whole country. So let's see what happened the first month. So first month we got 7. I'm just going to move us on because that's too early, isn't it? Too early. Then we got 6. Then we got an 8. If I'm in a board session at this point, I'll say to them, look, I might have 100 slides like this, so we need to commit at some point, or maybe we don't. Now we've got 4 months of success. At this point with the board, they're probably getting a bit more confident now. And I might at this point start to get some yeses going into the chat box. And when we get to 7 points, then yes, most people are happy. And I'll come on to how we teach things in a little moment. So 7 months of success. So we're all pretty happy now that things are looking pretty good. So here comes the big reveal moment. Now, John's seen this before, so he knows what is coming. So I told you it was a real data set, but I didn't tell you what it was. So what was the data? I'm sure that you've all heard of the Beatles. They were pretty famous, weren't they, a lot of years ago. So what was the data that I was using? It was data that related to Beatles' #1 hit singles. So what I was plotting to start with was the number of characters in the song titles of consecutive #1. So when I wanted the bonus, that was help ! Then of course we had that negative trend of 4. Now, why do we do this with boards? We do it to show them that even in a totally random data set, we have high points, we have low points, we have patterns in the data. And the problem is that sometimes we try and apply significance to patterns in the data where there is no significance. And in the NHS, the consequence of that is lots of people overreact and people get sent off to do lots of things that they shouldn't be sent off to do. Now, when I implemented the improvement idea, I was plotting consonants only. The great thing, of course, about the chart was it knew that something had changed, so it took away the guesswork. So there's a little example of what do we do with boards. So it's not your standard type of teaching. Okay, so I talked about the spuddling word. That's what you heard, wasn't it, when you joined this session? So I suggest to you that we see lots of spuddling in the NHS. You probably haven't heard of the word. What's the definition? To make a lot of fuss about trivial things as if they were important. Boards love this word and they write it down. They love the spuddling word. So we do lots of data spuddling in the NHS, and that's clearly a really bad thing to do. So we don't want the big fuss and drama of spuddling. Now, boards really liked this word. They asked us if we could create some cards for them so they could use them in their meetings. So here we've got Alistair, he's an anaesthetist, and he's got his spuddling cards. It doesn't say you are spuddling, it asks the question. So he raises the yellow card, first warning, if he suspects somebody of overreacting to a data point, and he raises the red card more forcefully if they do it again. So it might sound a little bit silly, but it's driving some real behaviour change in our organisations. So simplicity, I talked about the fact that what we were teaching was very simple. So I know that you know about SPC in the NHS. I think we've sometimes overcomplicated it. So we just go through very simply. We've done more interactive stuff than I've done with you. So we've engaged with people more, but now we're going to talk to them about a chart. We just talked to them about it being a simple chart. So SPC, sorry, I assume that everybody knew what SPC is, statistical process control. So here we've got an SPC chart. So we've got time series data, and we have these three lines, the mean and the process limits. We don't talk about technical stuff. We do talk about the fact that the process limits are calculated using a very particular calculation. And just to say that the biggest error that we see people making is calculation of the process limits incorrectly. Now, what we do talk about with boards is the importance of the process limits, in that they need to remember that around 99% of the data points are going to fall between the process limits. In terms of how many points do we need to create a robust chart, when I started this work, we could have debated this stuff forever. We could have debated forever how many precise points should we use for chart. And that, to be frank, didn't really help anybody carrying on that debate. So we did all of the research that we could, and we made a pragmatic decision that if you had 15 or more, you had enough points. So that's what we've stuck with. In terms of the rules, we're recommending these 4 rules are applied in healthcare. We know that there are more, of course we do, but these are the 4 that we see most usefully applied to healthcare. So these are the 4 that we are recommending. And here's one of the important things that we're doing that's a little bit different that we hadn't seen before, is we've adopted a colour convention to basically highlight that special cause variation when a rule is triggered. So we're using orange for a concerning pattern in the data and blue for a pattern in the data that looks like improvement. Now, when we started work with boards, we talked about measurement for improvement. So in the NHS, we used SPC just for improvement projects, really. And what boards said to us, they said, well, Sam, we know about SPC, that's for an improvement project, but we're here as board members with a very important assurance role. So we've got lots of targets. That's what we're interested in. And it's the RAG report that's the important tool for the job there. So we focus our training with boards on looking at targets. So we go through more interaction and we ask them about this chart. So what do we know about the likelihood of achieving this target? Of course, now they know about the process limits and how important they are. So hopefully they're going to tell us that it's not going to be possible to achieve the targets. We need to redesign the system. And if we're going to redesign the system, then of course we're going to use SPC in the sense that we've used it traditionally. So how are we maximising the impact of our SPC? And I do think this has been critical to our success. It's been highlighting of that special cause variation. We've come up with the idea of summary icons to avoid the need for hundreds of charts. That was a barrier at the start. People said, look, Sam, we can't have hundreds of charts. So we've got these summary icons. The variation icon shows us what's happening in terms of variation. So orange icon is getting worse, a blue icon is getting better, and then the grey icon is common cause. And the assurance icon, the blue P, we're going to consistently pass the target, orange F consistently fail. And the question mark is, of course, that flip-flop situation where we're going to achieve sometimes and sometimes we're not. In terms of those colours, if you're colourblind, you can differentiate between blue and orange, and you can't between red and green. So that's an added bonus in terms of these colours. And we do, of course, need narrative, which actually describes what the data is saying. That's an area that people are struggling with. So even where they've got the charts, they're still talking quite frequently about the number went up or it went down. So we're providing precise training on narrative. Now, I should say that we know that there are lots of different types of charts. Donald Wheeler, who we love a lot, he says XMR is good enough for most things. So that's the approach that we have taken. So thanks, Don. We love your books. And I'm really excited to see that we don't need to go out to Kansas now to do his training. So my colleague Karen, who is a statistician, she's now going to be doing Donald Wheeler's course in April that he's delivering virtually. So we focus on XMR charts. So they are good for most data, of course, not for rare event data. We know that there's research evidence that says that people are confused by all of the different charts, and that puts them off using them at all. That's another reason that we focus on XMR charts. And of course, XMR charts don't require the data to be distributed in a certain way, and the other charts do. Maybe something at the end just to come on to Karen. I've got her to analyse different data sets using P charts, and she's done C charts, and I think she's done another couple of the charts to look at what different messages do we get from the data compared to an XMR chart. And the answer is, well, we haven't yet seen an example where there really is a difference. So that's kind of reinforced the point that we're making in terms of sticking to XMR, at least for now. But you may have examples where that's not the case, and I would be genuinely really excited to hear about that. Now, it is important that we talk to boards or any audience about the evidence base. And I wasn't aware of the vast evidence base when I started in NHS improvement three and a half years ago. So we've got all of this academic research, which is fabulous, but nobody in the NHS has known that it's there. So we encourage people to read these two papers. So this is about SPC in healthcare, and we don't really need them to read the papers. We just need to be able to say there is an evidence base. This isn't a new faddy thing. Of course, it's not new at all. So finally, at least we've got round to using SPC. Now, the third thing that I talked about was tailoring the sessions. So when we run our training, we tailor the sessions, we use local data. So I've just got a few little examples for you here. So here we've got an image that's typical of what organisations would look at. So this is referral to treatment performance. So we've got a target associated with this of 92%. So this is looking at elective waiting times. So clearly with COVID, things are going to look much, much redder here. Now, at the start of the training, we'll have asked boards about this visual, and most people would have told us that they like the colour coding because it's helping them focus their attention on what's important, and what's important is the red. So we'll now look at two specialties. So we'll look at general surgery. It's all red with a downward arrow. What does the SPC chart reveal? Well, it reveals that they've made some fantastic improvements. So they're not yet achieving the target, but the message to this team should be, well done. Keep going. We're going to leave you alone. We're not going to nag you about not achieving the target yet. Say well done to the team. So fabulous improvement work. Looking at rheumatology, it looks the same in the RAG table. What does the SPC chart reveal? Here we see a concerning picture in terms of deterioration. So clearly a totally different reaction is required. We need people to be looking to support rheumatology, what's going on here. And this example is enough to get people to understand why RAG reporting is unhelpful. Here's another referral to treatment example. So this is a must-do priority for organisations. This was the only data in the board report. There was not any words at all about referral to treatment. So what did we show the board? We showed them these graphs. So these are, of course, small graphs, but you now know the colour conventions. So they're quite easy to understand. So we can identify immediately where we've got that orange for concern and where we've got a couple of areas where we're seeing improvement. But don't forget, we don't need all of the charts. We could just have those summary icons, which are proving very popular. So, hey, these three areas, I reckon people probably knew that there was poor performance here, because they've got the orange F, indicating that they haven't had a capable system in terms of achieving the target. Their performance is deteriorating, but we might have known about those. We've got these 2 areas where we've got improvement that should of course be celebrated. And then we've got 4 areas here where I've got the exclamation marks, where they've been able to achieve the target consistently, but they've got the orange icon indicating that their performance is deteriorating. So might we have missed this? I reckon that we probably would have missed this. And maybe we can go and find out what's happening and we can retrieve the situation. So it does take a little while to get used to the icons. Clearly the different combination of icons require different actions. So here we've got the flip-flop icon, so achieving and not achieving the target randomly, and we've got stable performance. Of course, it's useful to also look at the chart, because here we can see the target line in the red is close to the upper process limit. So in fact, it's unlikely they're going to achieve the target. They've got that stable performance, so we'd want to do some improvement work in this situation. Here we have been able to achieve the target, but the performance is slipping. So what are we going to do here? So here we need to go and become a detective, go and find out what's happening. And this last example, again, we're achieving the target randomly, but we've got those dots of improvement in the blue. So hey, what we want to be doing here is we want to be celebrating that improvement, but clearly if that improvement continues, we'll be in a position where we can and we should recalculate those process limits. Now, just to say that we don't in our board sessions necessarily cover things like recalculating of process limits unless we've got specific examples. If we have got specific examples, we do, but we don't overload people with absolutely every single thing that they could learn about an SPC chart right at the start, because that's going to phase them. Another couple of quick examples: cancer 62-day performance. So they're using RAG reporting. Often look at the commentary. So what did I read about? Pressures continuing, recovering in March. I went back and looked at some older reports. I read about more pressures, a good recovery in June, sustainment difficult in July, and August showing improvement. This is another real example. So what does my SPC chart reveal? Let's have a look. So I've done something here that you might think is a little bit strange. I've coloured the dots dependent on whether the target's being achieved. The target is the red dotted line. So here, what behaviour is Sam worried about? You know what I'm worried about. This is your new word. Worried about the spuddling, because when people go into the red, of course, they're going to go into a panic. So if we take away the artificial colours, we've just got, of course, grey dots of common cause variation. And here I'm overlaying what people mentioned in the commentaries. So pressures, recovered the situation, more pressures, they recovered again, difficult then, and that's when they improved the performance in August. Whereas of course, we know from the chart we've got common cause variation, and we know because the target line is close to the mean, we're going to hit and miss the target randomly. Of course, we would want to understand why the process limits are wide. It may well be low numbers in this instance, but that's what they should be focusing on, looking at reducing that variation. My last example, my killer example here. So we're not just trying to get rid of RAG reporting, we're trying to get rid of any badly presented data. And this definitely falls into the category of badly presented data from my perspective. So we've got these different lines, different performance for different years using a different line. We call them spaghetti charts. We hate them. We see them quite a lot though. We've got breaches, we've got a target on here. Now let's have a look at the words. So what do we learn from the words? I learn about a further decline from last month, a doubling of cancer treatments in year, most treatments completed in December, and look, they've developed a recovery plan. So that's fabulous. So what did the SPC chart reveal in this particular board session? So this is what it revealed. You can see why the colours are helpful now, hopefully. They're not having to remember the rules and counting the dots. We're taking that guesswork away from them. So orange dots of concern. They knew things were not good, to be fair, but they didn't realise they'd been so concerning for such a long time. So 13 months of concerning performance. We look at the target line and the process limits. What do we learn? It's unlikely the target's going to be achieved, and clearly they haven't achieved it for a good while. So I run these sessions and I try to think about them through the lens of a board member, and I think, when would they have noticed that there was a problem here? They would have noticed it 6 months earlier in November. And what were they looking at back in November? So this is what they were looking at, the same horrible chart with less data in it. But here comes the killer commentary, because what did I read? I read about an improvement in performance. That's because, of course, the performance was slightly better this month than last month. And I read about optimism to deliver this by the end of the year. Now, the optimism, I'm optimistic, but clearly optimism doesn't solve everything. One of the non-exec directors at the end of this particular session, she said, I remember that board meeting. It was my first board meeting, and I felt reassured by hearing about the optimism. So this is why the training that we're delivering is being really impactful. It's scaring people. We're using their examples, we're using their data, we're replaying it to them in a very different way. So we've got hundreds of examples like that, but what does good look like from our perspective? So it was Kettering Trust that came up with the first integrated performance report that we considered to be exemplary. So it's a one-page summary, so that's quite radical in itself. This is for the whole of performance, quality, workforce, and finance. They're then using the summary icons for each section of the integrated performance report, and then they're including the full chart by exception where there's something that the board should have a conversation about. So you'll see the colour convention here that they're using. We've got that structure on the right-hand side, which talks about the data. But the really important thing is the structured commentary in terms of what's the chart telling us, what are the issues, and what are we doing about them. And that's been really transformational. When boards have changed their reporting to this format, it's taken them a while to get used to this, but it's meant that they've had much more focused narrative. They've had to. The non-exec directors have been able to challenge a lot more, and they're now absolutely able to focus on the things that they should be focusing on. They also have a committee highlights section, which provides clarity about which decisions have been made by a board subcommittee and which items do the board need to discuss. Now, this Kettering report is providing a blueprint for the whole of the NHS. And in fact, yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we ran an hour session with the Kettering team. We had a number of exec directors, we had the deputy chairman, we had a governor, we had a range of individuals. And it was an interview session where I asked them about their journey on making data count. And the fascinating thing for me is loads of huge benefits, but probably the biggest voice was the voice of the non-exec director and the governor that said that the transition had made it so much better for them. And they had a bigger voice. They were able to now have proper conversations. So here's just a few examples. You can see that Kettering has led the way. So here we're seeing lots and lots and lots of trusts across the country using the colour convention, using the icons and having that more structured commentary. People are putting indicators together, which of course is very, very helpful. I like this. So they're using SPC charts, and then they're using the icons to look at what kind of incidents we've got here, what kind of variation are they exhibiting. Looking at different units, again using those icons, and really like this example from Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells. So here's their view, just looking at whether they're achieving the targets or not. So the list where they're consistently passing the target, where they're failing it, where they're hitting and missing. I don't normally like these radar plots, but I do quite like this because it gives a good overall kind of view of which domains they're doing well at and which ones they're not. And again, we can see here icons, and we can see that they're using, again, those graphs together. They're using this to understand their recovery post-COVID. So people have changed their reporting, so that's great. That's a big tick. They've changed, but so what in many ways? So we've got lots of comments about how the impact has worked with boards. So it's basically enabled them to focus on the things that are important. They're absolutely, definitely doing less of the spuddling stuff, which is fantastic. We've got lots of little videos. I'm not going to play this video, but Peter's a trust secretary. This little 3-minute video, he just talks about the impact of adopting those icons and how it has strengthened their governance processes. And we've had some independent evaluation interviews done. And actually, we're going to be publishing in BMJ Leader, hopefully very soon, she says with fingers crossed, about the impact of our work with boards. Why has it worked? I think that this quote is, in a nutshell, one of the real key things. So I've talked about the data being fed back to people. So here, you know, this guy's talking about if it'd been other people's data, it wouldn't have been the same. We'd already accepted the data. We'd made decisions on the data that Sam showed us in that session. And she showed us the data in a different way. And we realized that in fact, there was a totally different story. We'd made a bad decision. So that's no doubt an absolutely key factor. So just a few more slides. So what resources are available if you're interested in looking a bit more about what we've been doing? So we've got these interactive PDFs. So this one focuses really on the basics, went down really, really well. We published it, I think, about 3 years ago now. And then we published another one because we hadn't thought about some of the things I've spoken to you about today, like the icons and the colour convention. They've been very, very popular, and there's the web page there. So just an example of, I've said that we're trying to be really, really practical. So we've got 3 approaches here to shifting. This is in our interactive PDF. So we're using 3 characters to identify basically when you should shift your process limit. So we've got shifty, shifts at the earliest opportunity, measured, does it in the right way, reluctant, doesn't want to do it at all. This might sound a little bit Mickey Mouse, but these are the kinds of things that people are remembering. It's meaning that it's not scary for people. And so here's the page from the interactive PDF with our little reluctant, shifty and measured characters. Of course, it makes it a bit humorous. So if we run big events, we ask people which character they are. You know, are they a shifty character? We've probably got a few shifty characters when we run a session. And we've got the videos and various things embedded in the PDFs. And we've got some real life scenarios that people can work through as teams, where we will basically give them 2 options in terms of answers, and they can work through the conversation. We do have some little mini guides, because of course you can't carry around an interactive PDF. So we've got little handbag size guides. If anybody wants some copies, we're just about to have some reprinted. They are very popular. So do get in touch. And I mentioned at the start that we've got a range of tools. And one of the barriers was that people didn't have tools to create SPC charts. So here we've got a simple tool just in Excel. People can key in their data. I did dry January for the first time I've kept going, which is very weird for me. Normally it's wine at any opportunity. So here I plotted my overnight heart rate, annotated the chart with dry January. So look at those blue dots of my heart rate coming down. We've also got a tool which enables you to create a whole SPC dashboard with 12 charts and a 50 chart tool, because lots of our organisations do need to analyse a lot of data. We've also got an analyst network. We've set that up so people can share what they're doing using Power BI, or we've got some work underway currently on R, Tableau. We've also got 1,000 lines of SQL scripts that's system agnostic that anybody can run to create the charts at scale using our colour convention. And I mentioned at the start that we deliver virtual training. So if anybody's interested in the training, we've got the 5 steps here. So step 1 is basically what we deliver to boards. Then step 2 goes through our tools. Step 3 focuses on the narrative. Step 4, we cover things like when to calculate process limits, when you might need to use a different type of chart, what to do if you've got a process limit that goes negative, that kind of stuff, and also some tips to convert colleagues. Step 5, we haven't run yet, but we're going to focus on comparisons and benchmarking, because people do that very badly as well. When we run sessions, we always get people to pledge action. So we used to run big sessions across the country with 100 people. And look, we've got loads of happy, smiley people that have come along, and that's their plot the dots pledge sheets, where they are pledging to go away and they're actually going to do something. So we trained a good few thousand people doing it like this. We also get people to pledge when they do our virtual training. So here's an example. Somebody came along to our training. This is a Kettering example again. So I read about the organisation moving away from complex narrative to understand the truth behind the data. So that's fabulous. And then via Twitter, I came across Rhi, who we meet here. And Rhi had led lots of work to reduce falls, done loads and loads of work. But of course, the big question was, had it made a difference? Well, she's looking very happy because she's used our SPC tool here. She's got those blue dots of improvement, so she's happy. For the first time, they knew that what they'd done had resulted in improvement, and of course that's a fabulous feeling. And here we've got Becky, so she's from Chesterfield Royal, and she went away. She was at one of those ambassador sessions, and look, she's got a making data count wall. So she's got lots of examples here that are clinical, but she's also used it for some different services like dictation services. We've got a virtual platform where people can discuss and debate, and they can access all of our resources. We've got over 1,000 people now on this platform. There's quite a lively discussion forum. So if anybody's interested, I can put the links in the chat in a moment. The link is of course in the slides there. So my parting thought is, if we adopted SPC, as you all know, we would be less headless chicken. Of course, the good news is we are becoming less headless chicken in the NHS because of this work. Then means that we can focus on our patients. The last few little key points, just as a reminder, when we started our board work, we did teach them other things. We taught them run charts, Pareto charts, a whole range of other things. Run charts confuse people, to be honest about it. SPC was the game changer. That's why we only teach them about SPC. We've talked about Donald Wheeler already, so XMR chart's been the way. We're quite flexible in terms of how many points to create an SPC chart. Like I said, we've opted for 15 or more. In terms of how many points should we react to in a shift, again, we're not prescriptive. We would recommend 6 or 7, but you know, if people have got stacks of people sitting around, they may react to less. We don't want them to. So we describe to them that it's a balance. What's your risk appetite for missing something alongside your resource to investigate? If you've got monthly data and you see something going wrong, I'd react after 6 points. I wouldn't wait till 8 points. And then we've got the colour convention, which has been really important. So what have we learned? And then we can have some questions and some discussion. I think it's really important to start with the board. If we hadn't started with the board, we'd have little pockets of things going on, which were great, but we wouldn't have consensus, and we wouldn't have change going down to the organisation. This morning, I spent half an hour with the Care Quality Commission board, so with Ted Baker, and they were in absolute agreement that this is the way to go. They're 100% committed to backing us. So important to start with the board. In terms of the board sessions, we've learned that 90 minutes is optimum time to get through the content, not to bore them, to allow for enough time for discussion. I've talked about the measurement for improvement term being unhelpful. Delivery style has been absolutely critical. Not everybody can deliver the style that we need. It is important to stress the evidence base, and those examples are critical. Ideally, we look for improvement that has been missed, deterioration that's missed, and we build on what's good. So we don't go in and rubbish their reporting.
Samantha Riley from NHS EI is giving us a session on making data count. Really good. They're recording it, so I'll share it if
you might want to go on mute, Fiona. I don't know if Fiona, if you're talking. I think you might be on mute now. That's good. So we build on what's good rather than rubbishing their report. People do like the term spuddling. So we've got lots of cars floating around the country. The icons have been a light bulb moment. That's provided us with the opportunity to finally get rid of those RAG summaries, which have been the only summary that people knew that they could use. People have assumed that they need expensive software. We've put that one to bed. And it has been important. We haven't provided huge amounts of follow-up support, but we do provide technical advice. We provide analyst training. I've talked about the training that we deliver already. So I think that combination of things has been why what we have done has worked. So there you go. I've stopped showing my screen now. So John, over to you.
Well, Sam, thank you. I was delighted with that, and you didn't stop smiling all the way through, so well done. What a nice sea change to hear of board members being encouraged to hold on and make a proper decision rather than knee-jerk on the first turn of the dice. That alone is powerful.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's great when we hear from organisations, when I bump into people, or I do use Twitter, I see people on Twitter tweeting about what they've done. We've now started to get into whole systems, as I mentioned, primary care. We've got our first foray into primary care. We're working in the Southwest. I think there's 170 primary care networks, and after Easter, we're providing training to them. So yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity. So I think there's no going back for the NHS, hopefully for a lot of years now, and people are moving between organisations. So they're taking the message with them. So we're not having the problem that we might have had before when we get a new chief exec and they say, oh, well, I like RAG reporting. One of the non-exec directors is going to say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to get Sam's team in again if we need to. We're not doing that because that means we're going to spuddle. So we've probably covered enough people to keep it going, maybe for a decade, who knows, we might slip back eventually. Happy to take any questions or have any discussion. How do you want to do it, John?
Well, I was going to suggest that there's a theme here. There's constant change in the strategic shape of the NHS, with ICSs and primary care networks and the like coming into play, just as the CCGs have got a grip on it all. So all the more power to your elbow for adapting to meet those new groups as well. Perhaps I should open the floor up and ask the others if I unmute everybody. I think I can do that. There we go. If I remove that. Okay, you can all unmute yourselves and have a go. Questions, please.
Got stunned silence, John. Wow.
Samantha, this is Frans. I'm based in the Netherlands, and what you told us is really a commendable job. So, you know, great stuff. As it appears, you have a critical mass in the UK now to support this, which is brilliant. And so from there you can, you know, only grow forward and you know, go on with the good work. So brilliant. But how do when there's a change in a board, do people get trained on SPC? Is that part of the interview interview for jobs, that, you know, people need to understand this and need to apply it in their work?
So that's not how it's worked so far. So to start with, we approached some boards to see if they would be interested in a session, and we would go in and run that session for 90 minutes, as I've described. I should say that the board sessions, it's been mainly word of mouth. People have heard about a great board session and they've invited us in, which has been fabulous. We haven't yet had to impose ourselves on anybody, although we could. So if they were poorly performing, we could tell them they had to have a board session. So I haven't got to the point yet where we can incorporate it into an interview process. I think that might be quite difficult. What we tried to do is just make the training really accessible and encourage people to attend it. So what I do is I provide training to new non-exec directors. When they join the NHS, they go through an induction programme. They have an hour with me where they hear a bit more than you have today about what we teach. But yeah, thanks for the feedback. I think that we've all been staggered about what we've achieved on the basis that there's been 3 people for the whole of England.
So Sam, it's David Anker. I'm very intrigued by what you've been telling us. I think that's terrific, particularly getting the boards on side. We've been trying very hard, working with the NHS, and still are in a number of different hospital boards. And you get people who come along and say, no, we're going to tear that up and we're going to do it my way. So I have 3 questions. One is board recruitment. I'm just wondering if you actually made it part of get it into the recruitment process. We've worked with a lot of blue chip non-public sector companies, BT and GSK and so on. And every time a new manager comes along, they've ripped up what we taught them and said, no, we're going to do it the way I did it. So there's a question there. Second question is, how do you take care of seasonality? Because a number of those charts you showed us there were monthly. And we know certain things get better in the winter and worse in the summer, or vice versa. So how do you separate out seasonality from people appearing to get either worse or better? And then the third question, and it's something we've faced in the police, because we work with the police, and there is a policeman on the call as well, because I let him know that this was going on. And one of the challenges we have with the police, amongst other things, is the regulator. Let's call it the regulator. It might not be the right term, but let's call it the regulator, HMICFRS, and the Police Care Quality Commission in your case. And I was intrigued that you were talking to the Care Quality Commission, because I've always said to the police, you've really got to go and educate HMICFRS, because they're asking you to do the wrong things most of the time and looking at part of the process instead of the whole system. So, you know, things like you must get a crime onto the system within 10 days, but it could take 60 days before you get back to the customer or the victim to say, actually, we're not going to investigate. I mean, just crazy things like this. So those I'd really be intrigued to know how you got on with those three things that we've struggled with, I'd say.
Okay, thanks, David. So in terms of the recruitment, I think that's where we'd like to get to. Maybe that's somewhere that I'd go next in terms of trying to get this embedded in all of the educational process that we've got. Of course, we've got junior doctor training, all of those kinds of things. So I agree that's something that we should have on our list. At the moment, we probably haven't had the capacity quite to go there, and we haven't had that problem of people coming in and saying, we're going to go back to the way that we used to do it, because I think we've got to a critical mass. We've probably trained, I reckon we've trained 11, 12,000 people. So we've got enough people that know about this for that not to have been a problem. There's always going to be another voice saying, no, we're going to stick with what we've got. We're going to do it the SPC way. But yeah, I've written down that I want to think about how we can try and tackle that education piece. So that's a good one.
So critical mass is a critical thing for you, of course. Yeah, got it. Understood.
In terms of seasonality, that is an interesting one. And we've had people say to us, you know, SPC doesn't work when there's seasonality. The view that we've taken is SPC absolutely exposes seasonality, and it exposes whether it's there or not. So very interestingly, we hear the stories about in winter something happens and then in summer it's quite different. More often than not, when we've actually looked at the data, what people have said about seasonality is absolutely not true. Now, there's a couple of exceptions to that, but in the main, we're not seeing the seasonality that people suggest is there. Now, we would talk to people about seasonality, for instance, in the NHS, we would discharge less patients at the weekend compared to in the week. So we'd suggest using different charts where there's true seasonality. But we don't talk to people about kind of separating out summer and winter, because it's really, really difficult to do that. So we should use examples for people. You know, sickness is an example where maybe we do see seasonality in sickness for some organisations, but absolutely not for others. So we don't kind of, we don't excuse the seasonality away. We kind of say, you've got some or you haven't. So maybe you've got special cause variation there. It might be seasonality, but we don't deal with it in a particularly kind of complex way. So that's how we deal with seasonality. We have got quite a lot in our second interactive guide on that. So it's not something that we would raise in a board session unless there's something specifically to talk about. But it has been fascinating in that many claims around seasonality just are not there. Similarly, claims are not there. We hear lots of stories like, well, there was poor performance in A&E that month or that week because we had more attendances. Well, let's look at the chart of attendances. Oh, you weren't busier. So we're basically trying to dispel all of those kind of stories, whether they're seasonality based or not. In terms of the regulator, so my organisation is one of the regulators in England, along with the CQC. The irony is, despite converting all of those boards, I've had less success with my own organisation. And we could have a whole conversation about why that is. I suspect partly it's because it's easier to have a performance management conversation that says, David, you're failing the target on X, Y, Z. Bash the table, do something about it, rather than having a slightly more sophisticated conversation. But hey, great progress getting the CQC, absolutely totally behind what we're talking about. And I've got one region in NHS England and improvement that have fully committed to adopt our approach. So our problem in terms of our regulatory behaviour is having a conversation with them about their performance based on a VAG table. I think you were talking a bit about kind of targets and setting of targets. So that's a definite problem as well. But hey, once I've sorted out the NHS, maybe then I'll get on to ministers. I've had a little foray. I did have a session with one of Matt Hancock's advisors before COVID occurred. Very pleased to say that some of the vaccination data has been analysed by my colleague Karen, the statistician. I suspect that's got to the vaccine task force using SPC in the format that I've suggested. But I want to sort out the NHS first.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
There's a question here from Robert Olive about has SPC wholly replaced red, amber, green, or are you running the two in parallel?
So occasionally, and this is a bit different for different organisations, so sometimes people are a little bit scared to lose the VAG totally. So we do see some organisations that end up with a bit of a hybrid, which is really unhelpful. So sometimes we see they've got a VAG summary, but then they've got beautiful SPC charts, beautiful charts, and maybe it's not that bad. So they've got the lovely charts, but they've still got the VAG summary, not ideal at all. So what we really want is for people, of course, to rip up what they've got and start again. And most organisations have done that. And the interesting thing for me, I should have said right at the start that my team, I might have said, in fact, my team support the most challenged trusts and systems. For those organisations, we provide a more extensive support offer. So we do more hand-holding with them. There was a question at the start of this, you know, Sam, are those organisations going to be able to change? They're really challenged. They're failing in lots of things. They're not going to be able to make the change. And what we've seen is that, in fact, organisations in that category have made the best change. They've made the fastest change. And I suspect it's because they're in such a concerning situation in terms of poor performance in so many areas that when I've come along and given them the answer to something, we said we're willing to help you, they've literally ripped up what they've got and they've gone wholeheartedly with what we've got now. And that's what we want people to do. So in the main, that's where people are going. If I had a bigger team, we'd go back around the country, we'd go to those organisations that have ended up with a bit of a hybrid, and we'd remind them, we do a little refresher with them. So maybe, you know, in a couple of years' time, maybe we'll be in that situation. We believe from our little assessment that there's around 75 trusts in England that are reliant on RAG reporting still. So we're going to be targeting those specifically to see if we can get them to have a session. We haven't yet had anybody say no, they don't want a session. I suspect they don't know about it. So John, if we do this in a year's time, I might have done all of those trusts. You never know, it's possible.
Terrific.
I've got another question from Stuart in here around SPC software. Okay, so this was one of the perceived barriers. People said to us, look, we love this idea, but we can't possibly do it because we haven't got any money. So that was a barrier. People thought they had to invest in expensive software, and that just is not the case. So if we think about the NHS, we've got lots of organisations, they're all using different systems. So some people might be reliant on Excel. If they've got no money, all of their reporting might be done in Excel. Clearly not ideal. That's why we've created things like the multi-chart tool, which means that they can analyse their data more quickly. And we'll work with their analysts to end up with a streamlined way to do it. People will use Power BI, they'll use Tableau, they'll use ClickView, there's loads and loads of different systems. The great thing is this can be done in any of those systems. So we've created over 1,000 lines of SQL script, which is freely available on our website. Anybody can take that script. It was developed to be system agnostic. We know it's been used very successfully across the board for different systems. So it basically does all of the SPC calculations in line with what I've told you in terms of our rules, etc. The icon automation, all of that is done automatically. And that analyst network has enabled us to mobilise people in different organisations to teach others about how they do things. So we've already got a session recorded on Power BI. We've got a session recorded on Tableau. Some of you might be familiar with R. That's all far too fancy for me. So of course that's a programming language. So we've now got the R community in the NHS. They're creating a package in R that people will be able to take off the shelf and use locally to create SPC charts. And hopefully we're going to get something similar in Python. So it can be done using whatever system that you've got, but it is a perceived barrier. Hope that helps.
There you go. Kitan, you have a question.
Hi, Samantha. Thank you for that presentation. Absolutely brilliant. I used to sit on a board 10 years ago, Northwest London Hospital Trust, and we had a combination of RAG and a bit of SPC. But I had one observation, one question. My first observation is that the way you presented it, and it's so good because it's not even about the SPC in a way that if you can take the pressure off the middle managers where they've been constantly bombarded about why numbers up or down, that just gives them some breathing space to go and actually do some work and some improvement. And I think if that in itself is very useful. And my second question is, Samantha, in terms of this work you've done, how does that tie up with PDCA, with the continuous improvement? Because of course, there needs to be a join there. And are there other teams that are continuing to support that area of improvement?
Okay, so first one, so I totally agree. So yeah, stopping that spuddling behaviour, that's been really important. And the thing that I should say is when we have seen organisations using SPC at board level, they might have a combination of other things as well. What we haven't seen until we started this work was the highlighting of the special cause variation. And I suggest that it wasn't therefore very impactful. And I think even worse than that, it meant that we had people on boards that went, well, yeah, we've got SPC. So what? Doesn't really make any difference. And undoubtedly, even where there has been SPC, because people haven't necessarily had the education piece in a very simplistic way, they haven't been able to use it properly. So that's the difference in terms of the board stuff. So our intervention is quite short and sharp. So it's 90-minute board session. We do all of that other training. We train their analysts, but it's quite a short, sharp intervention. There is a bigger team in NHS Improvement that focuses on the improvement side of things. So there's something called the QSA team, Quality Service Improvement Redesign. So they would deliver a whole load of training that's more your kind of improvement methodology, improvement science stuff. So they do a lot of training. In the NHS now, we're having regional improvement hubs that are being established. So it's quite early days in terms of them being established, but they will be the resources at a regional level that will pick up all of that work. But lots of trusts would have, as you probably are aware, improvement teams in addition, not all of them, but lots of them would have those teams that are driving that improvement work locally.
Thank you.
Okay, I can see a question from Robert. Did you start by educating and converting the analysts prior to the boards? Okay. Interesting one, that one. So to start with, we started with the boards, and what we try to do is get the analyst or the head of performance involved in the board sessions so they could hear it as well. Of course, every board has then said, Sam, that's an amazing session. We want the change to happen absolutely right now. And then it's put a lot of pressure on the information teams, which has been a problem. So what we started to do now is if we know we're going into an organisation to run a board session, we'll connect with the analytical team to start with. I mean, to be honest, at this stage, now we've done 120 boards and we haven't had a board say no. We kind of know that every board is going to say yes, they're going to make the change. And if they don't say yes, that's kind of their problem, to be honest. We know that what we teach works. When we ran the early board sessions, of course, we didn't know if the board was going to adopt SPC. So we didn't want to go to the analysts to train them up if the board was going to say they didn't want to make the change. What we're doing now is trying to train the analyst, or at least give them a heads up to start with, so they're well equipped when their board says, yes, we want that new report and we want it in a couple of months' time. I think that's working well. That analyst network, we've got 360 people on the invite list. So we've got good knowledge out there now amongst analysts around doing this, but it's a really good question. So I suggest that, yeah, it's a good idea to warm up analysts to start with. Otherwise, of course, it puts a massive workload on them because they're going to have to continue probably with old style reporting, they're going to have to continue reporting to feed the beast of NHS Improvement and NHS England. So anything to help them before the board suddenly goes, oh, I want something new, is really, really helpful. So Terence has got a question. Is it improvement training based on SPC thinking? So the training that we run for boards is solely focused on how they visualize the data, the difference in visualizing data as RAG reports or those horrible spaghetti charts or anything else that's horrible. We've got lots of examples of bad charts, and how SPC can enable them to understand what's going on with their data, whether that's understanding that things aren't changing. Of course, lots of people will be trying to improve things, but the SPC chart might reveal that nothing's actually resulting from that improvement work, whether they need to intervene in terms of things getting worse. So we'll touch on improvement, we'll touch on you'd want to do some improvement here, but we don't.
Sam, I was more worried that you talked about there being another improvement group teaching improvement methods and so on. And I was concerned that they would potentially undo all your good work if their improvement methods were, I don't know, Six Sigma based or some other very theoretical base, and didn't understand SPC and the simple idea of signals and so on. They would go around undermining what you've achieved.
No, they're fully aware. So the model that we use in the NHS is pretty simple. It's the model for improvements. So SPC is a core component of that. And if they were called in to do any work with boards, if they wanted specific measurement support, then they would call us in to do the measurement section within the board development session.
After all, it's an NHS standard, isn't it, to use the cycle, and Don Berwick and IHI go the same way, don't we?
Exactly. So John, we've run over time, haven't we? I've still got some time.
Yeah, the idea was to make about 75 minutes in total, so we've got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I've got to be done by 4, but happy to have some more discussion.
Terrific. So folks, pitch in.
So I've got a question for you then. So has what I've told any of you surprised you? Have I said anything weird, or have I said things that have made you go, oh my God, she's telling people that? That's wrong. That's bad. Sounds been bad.
No, quite the contrary. I think you're doing a terrific job, and I'm impressed, really, how you have achieved to create a critical mass that's going to help, to bring this further. So, really commendable job.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. I think it's always great to see how people get these ideas across, and you've been very inventive. You've kept it simple. You've used their own data. You've made an impact by doing that. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. One question though, Samantha, if you had a chance to start all over again, what would you have done differently?
Oh, that's a good one. Being honest, not a huge amount. Not a huge amount. We kind of followed our nose with this. I didn't come up. I'm not a person to write a massive project plan or a project initiation document. That's not how I work. I had the great pleasure of going through a program some years ago called the Academy for Large Scale Change, which, if you're not familiar with it, you can Google it. It was basically some work by Paul Plesic, who's fantastic. He's become a good friend. And it was really looking at how can we achieve massive change at scale quickly. And it was really come up with why you're doing what you're doing, be clear about why you're doing it, be clear that you're going to do something, go away and do it, see if it works, use the right hooks to get people hooked into the work, and just basically keep going. And that's what we've done. So I'm pleased that we took that approach. We did co-design the resources that I've talked to you about. So we didn't have massive boards. We didn't have bureaucracy around all of this. We were very agile, from the whole concept of making data count having been thought of by me and it being delivered as a PDF was 3 months. My dad died in between. We had loads of stuff going on. We still managed to deliver something with a small design company and getting input from the service. The thing that I probably would have done if I'd known what I know now is I probably would have set up that analyst network sooner, because I think we could have driven the change more quickly. I think that would have made it easier for the people that maybe struggled in the early days and they suddenly were told that they needed a whole new report. But I think that it was the right approach and we were just lucky, probably. So no big regrets.
Have you got time for one? Can I ask one question, please?
Of course.
I can fully understand where you're coming from. And I think that to involve the board at the top is important. And they often always buy in and go through. The people, shall we say, who are working at the lower levels in the organization are always generally very enthusiastic about it. I'd be interested to hear what reaction you got from the medical consultants.
Okay, very good reaction. So, of course, doctors understand about variation because they're dealing with it the whole time when they're looking at temperature charts and various other test results, etc. So clinicians really, really love it. So we haven't had a problem with them at all. We haven't had a problem with any frontline staff. And just to say, the training that we provide to boards is exactly the training that we provide to everybody else. So we're not delivering something separately to boards, to delivering a session to physiotherapists or ward staff or to governors of an organisation. So we haven't had any problems translating that training to any level. And the medics have loved it. The nurses love it, like the example that we saw there, because they're finally seeing that actually improvement work that they might have done has resulted in improvement, or maybe they've seen that it hasn't resulted in improvements. They can go away and have a look at why that hasn't happened. But people are, I was thinking the other day, why are people so excited about this? People literally really enthused by it. We've now got some work underway looking at finance, because we haven't been confident about SPC with finance data. So it felt intuitively, surely this can apply to finance data. So some people went away, they had a bit of a play. We ran a session in January, we had 160 people. We've now got a subgroup of that. And people are really excited about it. We've got people, not being funny, I haven't met that many accountants in my life that are super excited when it comes to data, not really, really, really excited. And some of them are now really excited. So I saw a tweet the other day from somebody called Kay. I learnt a new term. Kay told me on Twitter that she was as giddy as a kipper. Never heard that one before. Giddy as a kipper. Look it up. It means super excited. She was giddy as a kipper because she just used our multiple chart tool and she's got 12 SPC charts to share with her colleagues the very next day at work using finance data. So they're excited because they're seeing things from the data, which means that they can do something. But the doctors have loved it.
Thank you.
And that must be the acid test. If the majority of NHS boards know that their trust is in a dodgy financial position, this is the real acid test.
So shall I put my email address in the chat? Would that be useful for anybody?
Yes, please. I was planning to send out a little bundle of links along with the recording to all those who've been on the call.
So I'll put it in now anyway.
Yes, please.
So just to say, the training that we deliver, it's all free. So John, I don't know if you've attended any of the training. I gave you a little preview, didn't I, when we met before?
That's right. I've read through it, but I didn't join the session.
They are fun sessions. We're getting 150 people a session normally. We managed, I never wanted to do board sessions remotely. We use Teams for our board sessions. When COVID hit, of course, we had to stop doing everything. And I said, look, we can't run board sessions virtually. It's not going to work. It's not going to work unless we eyeball them in the room. And I'm pleased to say I was totally wrong about that. I might argue that the board sessions remotely work even better. People can see the screen really, really clearly. We have really good interaction. I think that maybe the non-execs are maybe a bit braver if they're not in the room, is what I perceive. So that's worked really well. And all of our training, to be honest, COVID's done us a favour from a work perspective, my team, because before we were travelling across the country, all corners of the country on trains forever. And now what we can do is I can run a board session in the morning in, Somerset, and then I can run a session with 300 analysts in the afternoon. mean, today I've run a session with the CQC senior leadership team this morning. I've then run a training session for the whole of the Midlands region. And now I'm talking to all of you. You're no doubt dotted all over the place. This session might not have ever happened, John.
Yes. Yes, good point.
Made us more efficient. I do miss people though, obviously.
Onwards and upwards. When we do eventually get to meet, I'm sure I can provide some cake and a cup of tea, because this has been a joy.
Fabulous. So cool for any last questions, I think.
Can I just ask one?
Yeah, of course.
Sam, brilliant. I'm actually in North Somerset, so not very far from you. I actually sat for the last, well, I gave up 2 years ago because it was so pointless, being like a non-executive director on a board in Bristol, and just moaning at every meeting that they should be using SBC. I was the patient representative, and they just kind of humoured me all the way through. And I gave them examples, but they just humoured me. And in the end, I just said, I'm leaving because it is pointless. One day you'll get it. Anyway, my question is, to what extent have you been appointed to do this by somebody at board level in the NHS, in NHS improvement? My experience of NHS improvement is and it's partly maybe because they're a regulator, that they're also very driven by targets. And there's been quite a lot of confusion over recent years about, in fact, how improvement is organised across the NHS. Mm-hmm. So you've given an impression that it's much more aligned now, and the different parts, which Terry alluded to this as well, are kind of connected. And that's a joy to see if it's true. I'm just wondering whether your team and you have just uncovered something that you weren't expected to uncover and have just run with it.
Yeah, so there was a leadership document published some years ago called Developing People Improving Care. There was a commitment within that to do a range of things, including do board development. So that's where the initial work started with boards. And that's why we first developed the board training session. But that only ran for a relatively short period of time. And I think it's fair to say that if I hadn't been there and I hadn't have kept going, I basically said, look, we've done all of those trusts that were on the pilot scheme, but I'm going to keep going. At the time, I should say, I worked for somebody that was totally unsupportive of what I was doing, totally. So I was having to do a lot of in secret. I was sneaking off to balls to run secret training sessions. So it was my passion that's driven it forward. And it's now absolutely acknowledged. I'm not saying it's necessarily acknowledged by Simon Stevens yet. I've had challenges getting my own organisation to change, as I've said, but my view was there's different ways to skin a cat. And if I can get a lot of the country doing this, it makes it a more powerful conversation for me to go back to the NHS England and Improvement Board. Of course, now we've merged with NHS England. When I started this, it was NHS Improvement. So I think that there is support. But I think I've got more work to do internally. You know, I want to get in front of the NHS EI board, like I had the opportunity with the CQC senior leadership team this morning.
Just as a supplementary, I'm just about to publish a paper next week in the Journal of Improvement Science, which shows how I've put my fatty liver and type 2 diabetes into remission using SBC.
Oh, wow. I need to look out for that then.
And so one of the highlights of the afternoon for me was when you just briefly mentioned that you'd managed to do something as a New Year resolution and showed it as an SBC chart.
Gave up alcohol, resting heart rate, yeah.
Well, I'm actually doing that as a kind of a systemic approach to several metrics on my whole system. And,
oh, wow.
And that's really paid dividends for me.
I'd love to see that, Julian.
Okay,
my email's in the chat box.
Okay, mate. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I've had a great time. Thanks for asking me, John.
You're very welcome, Sam. It's really made my day.
Excellent.
So, folks, I think it's time for a little round of applause.
Yep.
Great, really good.
Thank you, Samantha.
We'll keep in touch, John. I'll send you my slides. I'll send you some links, and then you can
Magic.
circulate them.
Thank you. I will bundle that stuff up, and we'll get it out to all these good folks. Look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Julian.
Bye.
Well done,
Take
folks.
care.
Brilliant.
It's
Thank
been
you.
great.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
A bientôt.
Thank you. Goodbye.